The curtain rises. A man stands alone beneath the blinding heat of stage light, his face carved in poise, his voice steady, commanding, eternal. To the world, he is Sir Laurence Olivier, the greatest actor of his time, the knight who turned Shakespeare into cinema, perfection made flesh. But behind that composure, behind the thunder of applause, something inside him trembles. For decades, audiences believed they were watching genius. Few realized they were also witnessing escape. Every line he spoke, every mask he wore, was a plea to stay hidden because offstage, there was pain too vast to play and love too broken to repair. They called him a legend. He called himself a fraud of feelings. And as the spotlight followed him through triumph and tragedy, he carried one secret heavier than fame itself. That acting wasn't what he did to live, it was how he survived. What happens when the stage becomes the only place a man dares to exist? Long before he became Sir Laurence Olivier, he was a boy from Dorking, England, restless, meticulous, haunted by a need to be seen. On the grand stages of London, he found his language, Shakespeare. Through Hamlet's torment, Othello's jealousy, and Richard III's hunger for power, he built a legend brick by brick, each role sharper, grander, more consuming than the last. By the 1,940 seconds, he wasn't just an actor, he was England's mirror. When he adapted Hamlet for film in 1948, it was more than cinema, it was confession disguised as art. The performance earned him an Academy Award and a knighthood, sealing his place among immortals. Yet, even then, he stood apart. Colleagues called him cold, unreachable, a man sculpted in marble, untouchable even in love. Vivien Leigh, his luminous counterpart both on stage and off, once said, "He acts better than he lives." Together they embodied perfection, but perfection was only another role to play. As fame grew, so did the silence behind it, a silence that would one day swallow him whole. He was the man who gave the world its greatest performances, yet could never find peace in his own. But what hid behind the brilliance of that voice? What truth lived in the shadows of a legend? Before the world saw the legend, there was only a boy restless, awkward, and endlessly curious. Laurence Olivier was born in 1907, the son of a strict Anglican clergyman whose sermons echoed through their quiet English home. Discipline, faith, and duty were his father's gifts and his chains. Acting, in contrast, was rebellion disguised as art. It was the one place he could feel emotion without being punished for it. He began his journey at the Central School of Speech and Drama, a world of voices and gestures where he discovered a terrifying truth. When he performed, he disappeared. It was intoxicating. The audience didn't see Laurence anymore, they saw Hamlet, Henry V, or whoever he chose to be. And for a man who feared himself, that disappearance felt like freedom. By the 1,930 seconds, his name was carved into the heart of the British stage. Critics called him the storm in human form. He wasn't acting, he was living through the words of others. His partnership with Vivien Leigh during Romeo and Juliet transformed his career and his heart. Together, they radiated beauty and danger, two meteors bound to collide. Hollywood soon called. In Wuthering Heights, 1939, he brought to life a passion so raw it transcended the screen. The world crowned him a star. England called him their pride. Yet inside, he whispered to himself that he still hadn't earned the applause. Every success only deepened his hunger to prove, to perfect, to escape. The stage became his church, his battlefield, and his hiding place. At the height of his glory, Laurence Olivier seemed untouchable. His name drew reverence, his performances rewrote the boundaries of art, and his face became the standard of English poise. Yet behind the flawless diction and iron control was a man quietly unraveling. The same discipline that made him great also suffocated him. His marriage to Vivien Leigh, once the most envied union in the theater world, became the most painful chapter of his life. She was brilliant, mercurial, and already haunted by the early signs of mental illness. Their love burned bright, too bright, consuming the air around them. On stage they were gods. Off stage they were ghosts of themselves, speaking in rehearsed politeness while drowning in exhaustion and shame. Olivier tried to manage it all. Her outbursts, the tabloids, the guilt of leaving her behind during productions. When he finally walked away, it wasn't from love, it was from helplessness. I had to save what was left of my mind, he once admitted to a friend. But the decision left him scarred, carrying a private wound that applause could never mend. As he built the National Theatre and shaped the next generation of actors, he buried his emotions deeper, molding them into art. Every performance became confession through disguise, a desperate act of control over the chaos he couldn't fix in real life. The world celebrated a genius. He saw only a man playing the role of one. Time, once his stage companion, began to turn against him. In the 1,960 seconds, the great Laurence Olivier was no longer just the titan of Shakespeare, he was an aging man, with a body that betrayed his will. A terrible onset accident left him with chronic pain, and years of physical exhaustion gnawed at his once perfect poise. Then came the quiet diagnosis: cancer. He chose silence over sympathy. Only a handful of confidants knew. To the rest of the world, he remained indestructible. He continued to act, refusing to yield. Each performance was a battle between spirit and flesh, a duel no audience could see. When his hands trembled, he turned it into character work. When pain made him stumble, he made it part of the role. Acting, once his escape, had become his armor. Behind the mask, he could still be whole. But isolation crept in. The young actors he had trained now filled the stages he once dominated. Directors hesitated to cast him, fearing the myth had become too heavy for the frame of a man. Journalists whispered that his brilliance was fading. Olivier responded with another performance. Calm, witty, untouchable while inside, fatigue and illness hollowed him out. In those final public years, he became a paradox. A man applauded for vitality while fighting to breathe between scenes. He never asked for pity. He simply returned to the stage, again and again, as if he could outperform mortality itself. The audience saw a legend standing tall. Only the shadows knew he was holding on by will alone. By the late 1,970 seconds, the lights around Laurence Olivier began to dim, not because the world forgot him, but because he was quietly walking away. The man who had once commanded every spotlight now chose solitude, disappearing between treatments, declining interviews, and avoiding cameras. He called it rest. Those who knew better understood it was retreat. Cancer had returned, spreading through his body with the same persistence that once drove his genius. Yet he refused public sympathy. Even as his health waned, he took on small film roles, each one a farewell in disguise. In Marathon Man, 1,976, his portrayal of a ruthless ex-Nazi was so chilling that no one realized he could barely stand between takes. He masked his frailty with precision, transforming pain into performance. He lived out his final years in quiet dignity, surrounded by family but mostly alone. His voice, once the sound of British theatre, grew softer, more fragile, like a memory fading on tape. When he finally passed in 1989, the news shocked a nation that hadn't known how much he'd been suffering. The official statements were brief, restrained, respectful, just as he would have wanted. No grand speeches, no final curtain call, only the echo of applause that seemed to linger in the air long after he was gone. The greatest actor of his age had exited the stage as he had lived gracefully, privately, and with secrets only the dark could keep. Laurence Olivier left behind more than films and trophies. He left a blueprint for what it means to disappear into art. Generations of actors still study his movements, his diction, his relentless pursuit of truth through illusion. But his real legacy is quieter, harder to define. It lies in the haunting precision of his eyes, the way he could make despair sound noble or transform cruelty into tragedy. Even after his passing, his work remains sacred ground. Hamlet, 1948, is still studied as the ultimate marriage of theater and cinema. Richard III echoes with the seductive chill of ambition. His voice, measured, thunderous, yet fragile at its edges, continues to haunt rehearsal rooms across the world. Yet those who look closer sense the melancholy beneath his mastery. The same perfection that immortalized him also imprisoned him. He never allowed himself to fail, to falter, to feel freely. Perhaps that is why his art endures, because within every flawless line there is a tremor of pain he never resolved. He once wrote, "The actor should never be himself." And perhaps that was the only way he knew to live, to become everyone but Laurence. Even now, decades later, his shadow remains on every stage, not as a ghost, but as a question. What does greatness cost when you give yourself entirely to it? Fame made him a monument. Shadow made him human. Between the roar of applause and the silence of his final years, Laurence Olivier lived in a fragile balance, half in light, half in hiding. The stage that gave him immortality also consumed his peace. Each ovation was both worship and farewell. He was the man who turned words into worlds, yet could never find one where he truly belonged. Beneath the armor of Shakespeare's kings and heroes, he was only a man aching, uncertain, desperate to stay needed. His brilliance was undeniable, but so was his loneliness. In the end, it wasn't illness that took him, it was time, and the quiet surrender of a soul that had given everything to illusion. The curtain fell softly, leaving behind echoes of greatness and grief intertwined, because that's the secret of every legend. The brighter the light, the deeper the shadow it casts. What do you see when you look at a legend? The brilliance or the burden? Laurence Olivier gave the world perfection, yet carried pain that no one could script. Perhaps that's why his story still lingers, because every standing ovation hides a silent cry. If you believe every light carries its own darkness, stay with us. There are more untold stories waiting behind the spotlight.